At the very least, we should all be following developments in hydroxychloroquine's use with interest and measured hope. Why wouldn't we be? Well, here's why. Donald Trump is for it. Several days ago, the president expressed confidence in hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for the epidemic. That was it for the media. If Trump is for it, they're against it, even if it might save American lives. What reactive children they are. And they immediately began a sustained push to discredit the drug long before the clinical results were in. CNN ran a story accusing the president of, quote, peddling unsubstantiated hope in dark times. NBC News parroted the line, blasting Trump for selling, quote, false hope.
Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope?
No, I don't think so.
Misrepresenting the preparedness right now.
No, I don't think so. I think that I think it's got
the not yet approved drug.
Such a lovely question. Look, it may work and it may not work, and I agree with the doctor what he said. May work, may not work. I feel good about it.
Well, in the midst of this propaganda blitz, a man in Arizona died after eating fish tank cleaner that contained chloroquine as an ingredient, and that was it. Suddenly, the president himself had all but murdered this poor guy with some quack medical cure called chloroquine. Here was CNN's description of it.
A game changer. That is how President Trump describes the anti-malarial drug chloroquine. It's now one of 69 drugs being investigated as potential treatment against coronavirus. The problem, it has not yet been approved. And in Arizona, one man has died after an apparent attempt to self-medicate with that drug.
So during the course of that segment, by the way, CNN never mentioned that the man ate aquarium cleaner and not medicine. They lied about the substantial, in fact, the central facts of what happened because they thought it might advance a political agenda. Then they informed viewers that Trump was also killing people in Nigeria.
John, after President Trump touted the use of chloroquine as a possible treatment for COVID-19, 3 Nigerians have overdosed from that drug, according to Nigerian health officials.
Now, keep in mind, this isn't a tax bill they're lying about. It's a potentially life-saving medicine that we are desperately trying to evaluate in the middle of a global pandemic. And it's not just CNN that's doing it. Consider this Bloomberg News story from last night. Quote, chloroquine no better than regular coronavirus care, study finds. That was the headline. And it sounds definitive. Why are we wasting our time with this crap? It doesn't work. But take a look at the details inside the piece. The story turns out to be based on an article in the Journal of Zhejiang University in China. The Chinese study in the article considered a total of just 15 patients, 15, who've been given chloroquine. It seems like an awfully small sample for a legitimate study. And in fact, the story does concede that it was. Quote, the results of the study weren't statistically significant. Researchers concluded that additional studies using larger numbers of patients are needed. In other words, the story doesn't really tell us anything. So why is Bloomberg News writing about it? Later in the story, we learn that in contrast to the protocol in that tiny Chinese study, doctors here in the West are administering hydroxychloroquine with antibiotics. And that combination, the two of them, hydroxychloroquine and antibiotics, appears to be effective. And that raises the same question once again. What exactly is the point of Bloomberg's so-called news story? The way the Chinese used the drug had nothing to do with the way we are using it here. The study is irrelevant. Writing about it doesn't illuminate anything. It misleads. That's the point. They're manipulating you. This is what happens when science becomes political. Suddenly people start lying, and you can't trust anything you hear. That's a very dangerous thing to do at a moment like this. The truth is essential. Just yesterday, the governor of Nevada, Steve Sisolak, issued an emergency order that banned doctors in his state from prescribing hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus unless it's administered in a hospital setting. Now, Sisolak is a politician. He's not a doctor. But he didn't hesitate to pronounce the drug, quote, unproven as a treatment for coronavirus. Well, that's true as a technical matter. But doctors prescribe medicines in new ways all the time. It's called off-label usage. It's legal and very common in places where Democratic governors don't decide to micromanage the details of medical care. So why did Sisolak do this? His statement suggested that hydroxychloroquine was somehow a threat to public health. But the real reason was likely the opposite of that. The governor was afraid of running out of it. Pharmacists across the country have reported a large increase in requests for the drug. Some of the requests have come from doctors who appear to be stockpiling it for themselves and for their families. This resulted in shortages. That is a problem, and it's a problem for a number of reasons, including because the drug is also used to treat chronic diseases like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. But there's one thing that it does prove conclusively. Donald Trump is not the only person who thinks hydroxychloroquine might be effective. A lot of practicing physicians think so too. Our leaders should be clear about that. And yet many of them are lying about it at a time when we are desperate for the truth. The thing we need above all is the truth.